Hey guys, welcome. Keith here. Today we're looking at the high pressure power steering hose on an Acura CL. This is a 3.0 VTEC engine, so there's probably a lot of cars by Honda where it's very similar. As you can see, there's a leak. The hose just kind of started leaking, and so it needs to be replaced. A while back, probably, I don't know, 6 months, I replaced the power steering pump, which you see right there, and oddly the power steering pump was very easy compared to the hose. The big issue is access and feeding it and getting it in and out, so the rest of the job isn't too hard. Because of access to the bottom fitting of the hose where it bolts into the rest of the power steering rack below, we thought it'd be easier, a friend of mine and myself, to start removing some of the stuff behind the firewalls. You can see that big canister that just came out.
The pink paint.
And there you see it right there. You can see where the line goes, and you'd be surprised how long it took to find out where that was, because you can't, at least we couldn't see it. I couldn't see it from under the car, but that was actually it right there. You can actually see where that fitting goes. You can see the little pink that was on the bolt. It basically is behind the engine, you know, down by the firewall, close to the driver's tire. Okay, so just moving a few other things out of the way here to make it a little easier to get at that fitting.
Regular wrench. See how I have the second wrench?
So you got two wrenches, yeah, like an extender bar. Can't seem to get in there. There we go.
So yeah, I backed it up with the second wrench in order to break it loose.
These fittings are on here usually pretty good, so this is not a required step of backing it up, but it does make it a little easier. And there you can see the fitting is loose, it's detached. So most people would probably start the job by taking the line off the power steering pump first. One advantage to doing it second, in other words loosening the fitting on the bottom of the car first, is it will then by gravity suck all of the fluid not just out of the line but also out of the reservoir box right there, which is nice because then you don't have to drain that separately and you can just fill it up with brand new fluid. Next is a couple of bolts up top, very easy to get out. After you pull the hose off, there is an O-ring that you're either going to need to reuse, or if you got a new one with your hose, then we'll put that on. We'll do that later. Now there are a number of clamps that are holding the hose down behind the engine in the back, and so just a matter of accessing those and pulling them out. Once the clamps are loose, you can now detach the top of the hose. Try to catch the fluid if you can. If this area is dirty on top, make sure you clean it really well before you detach it so you don't accidentally drip fluid and dirt inside your pump. Next is going to be the electrical connector that goes to the sensor. as another view. So it's just one of those little plastic release clips. It's more of an issue of getting to it. Since the hose is almost ready to come out now, one more clamp down here, and there's a bushing that will actually go around the new hose.
What is that, a 10 millimeter?
Yes. What do we see over there on that end where this thing is going? Okay.
This is an optional step you may or may not have to do. We're going to loosen up there's a bracket on the back firewall, and it's a little hard to see. Get the camera down there, so I'm going to kind of explain. There's a heater hose assembly back there, bracket that secures it to the firewall. These are the rubber coolant hoses that take hot water into the cabin of your car to give you heat. So we're not going to like totally take it apart. We're just going to loosen that bracket to give us some movement, so that there's more clearance in taking the power steering hose in and out. What you have to understand is most of the power steering hose is a metal stiff line, and you can't just jam it down in there or rip it out. It's a little fragile, and so we're loosening up this bracket to give us a little more wiggle room.
Okay, so this is possibly an optional step, but it seemed like it was required for us because we couldn't get the hose out from under the car. And so there are cross members that need to be loosened but not removed. So here's one, it's 17 millimeter. Here's the other over here. You get to it. Right there. You can see me tapping with the light. So do not take them out. Just loosen them, and it gives you more clearance. And then there's two more on the other side, so 17 millimeter bolts. All right, so if you're lucky enough to get the job done without that, great. But after a lot of trying and to get it out, this was the final thing that helped it be able to give us room to feed it through.
What's the chance you can pull up on that a little bit? Yay or nay?
Yeah, I can pull up on it.
Just a little bit. Don't go crazy.
Well, I'm just loosely gripping it so you can pull it on my hand.
So I decided to actually leave some of the struggle part of the video in, just so you can kind of see this was not the easiest job. We're both pretty experienced mechanics and have done a lot of stuff on cars, and this hose was not easy. For us, it helped to have two people, one up top on the engine and is kind of alternating with us, one guy under the car. And in this case, we each kind of had to wiggle it and at the same time to just get it to come up, because it's a stiff line and it's just so jammed in there. So anyway, I thought it would be good to have a little bit of reality mixed in these videos. Sometimes you watch a 10 or 15 minute YouTube demo on fixing a car and you're like, wow, that's easy, what a snap, it should be so easy. Well, it's not always. This one wasn't. Anyway, we got it out, and now we're going to remove and install the new sensor. Ta-da.
So there's an O-ring here, there's one on the new one.
Was that a 17 mil?
This is, yes.
And installation is the reverse.
That's it. That makes a good holder.
So doesn't that sensor need to be put in first, or are you thinking that might be in the way?
I'm thinking that I can do it without that in there.
Another optional step here, my buddy decided to leave the sensor off for right now because of the difficulty in getting the hose out. And that turned out to be a smart move. It was much easier to thread the new one in without the sensor. Now the hose is in place and we're to the point of screwing the fitting in. And again, two people kind of came in handy here. One person under the car and another up top wiggling it so you can just get the threads in place. And so now we're wrenching it in. Come on, you mother, focus. So the new one is in. There's the new fitting in place and the electrical plug. We actually fed the hose in without that piece installed because it was easier to get the whole thing in, and then just bolted that sucker down. Little clarification again, the benefit for us of putting the sensor in last, it's not that the sensor is hard to get to, it's that the sensor installed makes the hose harder to twist and turn as we're feeding it into place. So that's why we left it off. Then when you do install it, just make sure you're using 2 wrenches, one on the hose and one to, bolt in the sensor. Well, the hard part's over, and now we're just going to bolt the top of the hose to the pump and add fluid and bleed the system.